Hey guys, Charlie Murphy here, recording another session of $1, $2 No Limit Texas Hold'em. We're on Ignition regular tables. Our games are up and running, so let's jump right in. Lower right-hand table, a recreational player playing about 30 blinds deep, limps under the gun. We go ahead and isolate with our ace-8 suited. He checks to us, and we'll range bet small on the king-10-4 two-tone board. He quickly calls on the 6 of hearts. There's no reason to continue bluffing. I could go all in here for about 1.3, 1.4x pot with vulnerable flushes, sets, good top pairs. I could probably trap with my nut flush type hands. I could also do that with various ace-x type hands, especially ace-queen and ace-jack would also have the gut shot. Here with ace-8, no heart, I'm content to check back. I will be bluffing an awful lot of rivers if he checks to me. I will fold to the lead, be calling down with any kings or tens or better type hands that I check back with. Probably most pairs actually call that. Pretty much any pair would call for that small size and that check call check bet line. Some merit to even trying to bluff catch against hands like queen jack or various whiffed gut shot type straight draws, but I don't think there's enough merit to actually go ahead and do it with ace high. And he had queen 8, so the idea that he was weak was not necessarily wrong. Lower left-hand table, face a 3x raise first in from the button. The small blind calls. We are going to go ahead and call on the big blind with king jack offsuit, being a bit tighter with this small blind call than we otherwise would be, but still not going to 3-bet that particular hand. Upper right-hand table, that limper just kind of stabs into that 3-blind pot for a third min bet. I'm going to go ahead and check raise with my open-ender. Lower left-hand table with the open-ended straight draw and 2 overcards. I'm going to go ahead and start betting out after everyone checks through on the flop. We got check raised by the small blind. Interesting. I'm actually think I'm just going to go ahead and fold this with the board being paired and the player that can still act without the action being closed, that player behind me on the button. Be more inclined to call if I had at least one kind of heart, as it gives me some ability to call down on these straight completing rivers that also have a heart in them that make a flush possible. With the board pairing, I'm a little bit too worried that I could even be drawing dead some percentage of the time, so I'm just going to go ahead and fold out here, even though it's a bit on the tight side. Wait, what? So that guy had 4-6 for a low gut shot to the 4-card straight, and then he bet the river apparently as a bluff when he made that bottom pair on that 4 straight run out and got called quickly by who's obviously a recreational player. And that 6 was good. I have to see what this other guy called down with here. So the recreational player had ace-jack offsuit with the ace of hearts. Interesting play. Upper right-hand table will open middle position with the pocket jacks. This table looks promising with all these players playing short in here as well. So we're going to keep an eye on what they do, but this is probably a pretty good table. Get called by 2 players in position. We're going to go ahead and check range on the queen 9-4 two-tone board. Lower right-hand table, a recreational player limps under the gun. We'll isolate with king-queen offsuit. This player goes ahead and bets about 75%. I'm going to go ahead and check call at least once with my pocket jacks. I'm ahead of bluffs. I'm even ahead of like 9x or random mid pairs that decided to go ahead and bet there. I'm going to go ahead and range bet on the lower right-hand table. I'm trying to decide if there's merit to value betting this river. I think I probably want to value bet as opposed to check and bluff catch, try to get called by 9x type hands. Lower right hand, we got picked off by a better queen, but that's okay. We can go ahead and actually raise this ace-queen up here against the 3x raise first end in the small blind flat. Probably got queens plus ace-king to stack off with there, plus a lot more suited Broadway hands and ace-queen offsuit type hands to put in my raise-fold range. And this guy's got that queen 5 suited, so we can just go ahead and tag him as a recreational player. So he's flatting the button with queen 5 offsuit on a short stack. Lower left-hand table will open 10 jack, jack 10 offsuit from the button. Upper left-hand table will open queen 10 offsuit from middle position. Face a very small 3-bet, getting almost 3-1. So I think I'm going to go ahead and call with pretty much everything here, but be cautious on my 1-pair type hands. That pre-flop price is just too good to go ahead and fold. We'll call 1 barrel with 2nd pair and some various backdoor draws. Against the 2nd barrel, though, we will go ahead and fold out. For right-hand table, we'll open middle position with jack 8 suited, kind of on the cusp, but there's a dead small blind, 1 less player to go through, so I think that's going to be fine to go ahead and raise first in. Upper right-hand table, the recreational player limps under the gun. We'll isolate on our button with something like a 27-28% range, including queen 7 suited. Lower right-hand table, we'll go ahead and range bet on king 7 two-tone. Let's see here. We got to call up 16 to win 27. So I think that's supposed to be a fold with a hand like queen high. Yeah, we don't really have 40% equity against this jamming range. Probably not too far off from a call, but we'll go ahead and fold that. A little bit smaller jam size. I think we just are priced in to call off with that hand and pretty much any hand. But for that price, I think I can go ahead and fold. Probably pretty close, but I think it's a fold. Upper right-hand table, we'll open king 9 suited from the cutoff. So recreational player quickly calls the button. And you also get a call from another recreational player in the big blind, and we'll go ahead and check range on the king jack 6 two-tone. 7 peels is giving us the backdoor flush draw as well, so I'm going to go ahead and start betting out my top pair now. We get check raised by a player who's probably on the aggressive side, but we've got top pair, we've got that flush draw, and we're getting a great price. We're obviously not folding. I'm trying to decide if there's any reason to go ahead and jam this back all in. There's probably not. I'm also trying to decide what I do on a blank river, as that line is probably not particularly bluffy. Now, he bets so small. For that quarter pot, I pretty much have to call just about everything. That's heavily overbluffed. The check raise bet line is pretty under bluff, but not enough to justify a fold here. So we'll go ahead and call this, expecting to be beat most of the time. Oh, but he had pocket threes. Had he jammed all in, I would have given him credit for having a better hand there. And that's pretty wacky, spazzy, aggressive play from that player. Upper right-hand table will open King 5 suited from middle position. And that Queen 8-10 two-tone, when this player has been so wacky and aggressive, I actually don't want to go ahead and range bet him here, so I'm just going to check that one back. Lower left-hand table will go ahead and 3-bet middle position against the under the gun raise first in. I'm just going to fold out my King 5 with no real equity except an overcard against this guy who's been wacky, spazzy, aggressive, and is never going to fold any kind of pair to me. We get called by the under-the-gun player on the lower left-hand table, and now we're going to go ahead and range bet on the Ace-Jack-9 two-tone board. Against that check raise, it's kind of suspicious in that it's hard for him to have jacks because I blocked the jack as well as ace-jack. He really shouldn't be doing that with ace-queen. I block ace-king to some extent and should be mostly 4-bet pre-flop. That's probably reasonably bluffy, but I'm just not completely sure of that. I, however, can have aces, jacks, nines, ace-jack suited, ace-king, and ace-queen, as well as a bunch of straight draws and flush draws. I think it's probably okay to fold the pair here, second pair in a check raise, just especially on an ace-high board. The ace-high flops tend to be less bluffy overall, at least by the time they get to the river. So I'm going to go ahead and make what might be a tight fold. Just give him credit for having ace-king, ace-queen, or, you know, the combos of ace-jack, jacks, and nines as well that I don't have killed off with my jack in the hand. Lower left-hand table will raise first in with Queen 10 suited from under the gun. Upper right-hand table, that spazzy recreational player limps the cutoff. We're going to go ahead and raise up against him in the small blind completer with our Jack 10 suited. We get 3-bet by the small blind, a pretty healthy size of 4.5x 3-bet. At equilibrium, that's probably a call, but against the player pool, that's probably a bit too passive. I'm going to respond a bit tighter and go ahead and fold that one. And then lower right-hand table, we got a blind-on-blind situation, raise first in. We can call the 3x raise first in with 5-4, though it's probably about the bottom of our defense range there. If you thought this guy was tighter, you could go ahead and fold out. But I think it's probably standard, but near the bottom of the standard defense range. I guess the only real good card here is a 3 for us, or the 7s and 2s and 8s aren't as bad, but they make higher straights and straight draws as well. I'm not going to stab this. I've got plenty of better stab candidates on the flop, both my pairs and strong hands, as well as various draws and backdoor draws. I'm going to check this one and reevaluate on the turn. And against the overbet, I'll just go ahead and fold with that low open-ender, you know, in the very low one-card flush draw. Upper left-hand table will open 6s for middle position. That table seems pretty reg-heavy, so I think we're going to shuffle that one out. Get 3-bet in position by a player who's starting to look reasonably aggressive, though I think 6s are still going to be too weak to go ahead and defend with, although it's a bit closer for that small size. I think it's still a fold, though. Pretty close, but I think it's still a fold. Lower right-hand table, the blinds have been passive, and at least the small blinds also been pretty tight, so I'm going to go ahead and expand my range and open with Jack 7. Lower left-hand table will open the button with pocket 5s. Lower right-hand table will open the cutoff with 10-8 suited. Against the in-position 3-bet, we can just fold a hand like 10-8 suited, though. Lower left-hand table will open the cutoff with 10-8 suited. Blind on blind, the upper left-hand table, we've got 9-5 offsuit. That's going to be too weak to go ahead and defend with, so we just fold that. We are defending that small blind, or the big blind, against a small blind raise first in pretty aggressively, probably only folding about 40% of hands. So we can fold a hand as weak as 9-5 offsuit. Games don't seem very weak or fishy right now, and not as good as they usually are, which is a shame. But hopefully find a few better tables here as this session continues. I don't play too much heads up, but against a player playing 30 blinds deep, I will start with that table and see how things go. I think I need to follow through on this particular river. I don't know that I really fold out too many pair-type hands without overbetting. So I'm going to go ahead and use the overbet here, fold out kings, maybe some aces. But not trip fours, of course. Let's see, upper left-hand table. Small blind's been reasonably aggressive. Big blind hasn't been aggressive, but he has been fairly loose. I'm not going to expand my range as wide as Jack-7 offsuit. Upper right-hand table, I will 3-bet the button raise first in from the small blind with my ace-jack suited. The lower left-hand table, blind on blind, 7-4 offsuit's probably just outside of standard open, but I'm going to go ahead and raise it first in, as I think this player playing 30 blinds deep is not going to be aggressive enough. They almost never are. Upper right-hand table will raise first in on the button with ace-10 suited. And the lower right-hand table in the small blind against the middle position raise first in, I will not defend with the ace-3 suited. I will let that one go. Upper right-hand table, we've got 8-7-3 two-tone, so I will go ahead and range bet small. And lower left-hand table will open pocket fours on the button. A short-stacked suspected recreational player calls the small blind, then leads into us for half pot on King Jack 6. I don't believe that's particularly strong, but my hand is so weak with so few cards that are good for it, I will go ahead and fold to that. I would float with any pair that's paired up with the board. I would float with pocket sevens or better as well. And I float with all kinds of various draws and even backdoor draws against that sizing. But with just pocket fours with 3 pairs on the board beat me, I'll go ahead and let that one go. Upper right-hand table, or lower left-hand table rather, I'm sorry, the player in the 5 seat limps under the gun. We'll go ahead and isolate with ace-queen suited from the cutoff. Probably a low 20% range there, about 21, 22% range of hands to isolate against this limper. Recreational player goes ahead and calls me on the button in position. And the limper calls. We go to the flop 3-handed with the Jack 10-9 rainbow board. I would typically be checking range had it checked to me. Now, given that this player leads into me, I think I'm going to pretty much be raising all in or folding. I'm going to be raising all in with my strong hands. I guess I could trap with the nut straight, but I would be raising all in with my various sets and overpairs, and I think this is a good enough hand to do it as well as I've got the open-ended straight draw. As well as 2 overcards. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and get this all in here with that much equity. Not expecting a ton of folds from this particular player that goes and leads for about 3/4 pot, but you never know. And I've got plenty of equity to bail me out if I do get called. I get called by this guy with the low straight and this guy with middle pair. Lower right-hand table, 8-7 suited is just outside my standard open range from middle position. Recreational player raises first in for 2.5x. I'm going to go ahead and defend my big blind with 5-4 suited. Check to him. He checks back on the Jack-6 deuce two-tone with the 8 peeling in the turn. I now have a double gut shot. The 3 or the 7 makes the straight for me, so I'm going to go ahead and overbet this. Set myself up for a big river pot, big river bet if I can make my straight, or perhaps bluff him off, as he's not shown any strength by checking back the flop. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, will open King-9 offsuit. Get called, and we'll check range on the 10-5-5 rainbow board. And against that pot-size stab, we'll just go ahead and fold our King-high. Upper left-hand table will open pocket 3s in middle position. A little bit loose, but I don't mind it. You could also fold. Just don't limp. Ten-9 offsuit on the cutoff on the lower right-hand table. That's just outside of a standard open. Let's see. Have these blinds been... He's been tight. He's been tight. He hasn't been particularly aggressive. I'm going to expand my range ever so slightly and include this. You could also fold it, though. Upper left-hand table, I'll range bet small on the Jack 10-7 two-tone board. Not expecting a ton of folds in that spot, but we'll get some. Lower right-hand table, we get called in position. We're going to check range on the Queen Jack 7 rainbow board. He checks back and ace peels on the turn. A king makes the nuts for us, and the 8 more or less makes the nuts, second nuts. We've got a nice robust draw, so I'm going to put this into my overbet line on the turn. I still have all my sets in my ace-high type hands. We rivered the 8 for essentially the nuts, so I'm going to go ahead and bet this strong again, try to get hero called for a large bet here, and I've got a very strong hand with my straight. And I'm going to go ahead and bluff with my 3s for a pot-sized bet on that 4 straight run out over there in the upper left-hand table. Upper left-hand table, cutoff raises first in. The small blind also calls. We'll go ahead and overcall the big blind with pocket 5s, and we'll be checking our range on the ace-jack-4 rainbow board. Mostly just looking for a third 5, especially multi-way in this particular scenario. And against that pretty decent-sized C-bet, about a 60% bet, we'll just go ahead and fold, especially with that player overcalling as well. Check raising is a lot better than check calling if you want to continue that hand for some reason, but I think you're going to be a lot better served to check raise your various gut shot type hands or backdoor flush draw type hands than a hand like pocket 5s. I do like it better than a hand like 6s, 7, 8s as you coordinate some with the ace and the 4. You could bang off runner, runner, wheel straight. I think it's probably too weak to continue with for the most part. We'll fold 4s in the small blind facing a cutoff raise first in on the upper left-hand table. Upper left-hand table, we'll open ace-king from middle position. That's now the lower right-hand table as we shuffled around our alignment. We get re-raised in position. We're just going to go ahead and 4-bet to call off with our queens plus an ace-king, which is fairly standard. This guy's played 12-12 or 26 hands. He's 3-bet one time out of 11 opportunities so far. I guess this makes 2 out of 12. Nothing that makes me want to deviate to be any looser or tighter than would be typical, so I'll just go ahead and 4-bet with my queens plus ace-king and perhaps ace-queen offsuit as a bluff. We get called. We have a king 6-4 two-tone flop. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small. He calls. On the 7 of diamonds, let's see, what can we have here? We can have aces, we can have top set of kings, and we can have all combos of ace-king. We also have ace-queen, the offsuit versions, and pocket queens. You know, the ace, I'm trying to think, I don't really have any high equity bluffs to jam all in. I think if I want to have some bluffs, it's going to be the ace-queen. This is my worst hand and has good removal to him having ace-king, king-queen, or pocket queens, his best call downs. I probably want to do it with hearts and or diamonds in my hand that blocks more of his hands that can call me. And I think a hand like ace-king offsuit, especially with no heart or diamond, can go ahead and be one of the shoves. It's one of my most vulnerable value hands. So I'm going to go ahead and ship this all in and see what he does. I think I could be trapping with some combos of aces and some combos of ace-king, as well as the pocket kings. Hand like ace-king, I think, is obviously too good to consider doing anything but going ahead and getting the money in, especially when it's vulnerable, and I've got my most vulnerable combo with no flush draw blockers there as well. So I think shipping that combo in is good. You can have some traps, but I like trapping better with pocket aces, or pocket kings, or the ace-kings that do in fact block flush draws. And we were chopping against another ace-king that really should have just got the money all in pre-flop, but instead opted to flat and take the flop instead. Upper left-hand table, we open the button with Jack-10 offsuit. Lower right-hand table, blind down blind. We face a 3x raise first in. I will use 6-5 suited as a pre-flop 3-bet and go ahead and raise him up. Upper right-hand table, we've got a fishy player playing reasonably deep as fish go in the small blind, about 70-some blinds, and we have a player that hasn't been aggressive too much pre-flop. Granted, only one orbit, too early to tell too much about these guys, but I'm going to go ahead and expand my range from the button, make a somewhat non-standard open with 9-7 offsuit, and try to either steal these blinds or get in the pot with the suspected rec. The small blind suspected recreational player does call. And he leads into me on Queen 10 Deuce two-tone, of which I don't really have anything in the way of real strong draws. I guess I got some weaker backdoor straight draws, but for that larger donk size, I'm just content to go ahead and fold. I'm going to tag him as a recreational player now based on flatting the small blind, playing 70-some blinds deep, and donking the flop into the pre-flop raiser. Upper left-hand table, face a middle position raise first in and a cutoff 3-bet. Our big blind is going to be a cold 4-bet or fold spot after that, of which hands like offsuit Broadway cards are not going to be a part of, with the exception of ace-king and ace-queen. King-jack offsuit is just a fold at that point. Upper left-hand table is interesting in that we have a button raise first in for 3x, and we're on the small blind with the ace-queen offsuit. It is typically a standard 3-bet, but this player is so tight, playing 12-2 over 45 hands. Only the second hand he's raised. I'm going to go ahead and be a lot tighter. I'm going to treat this essentially like an under-the-gun raise first in as opposed to the button, because this guy is so tight and passive. I'm going to 3-bet the ace-queen offsuit, but even that feels like a bit out of line to me with how tight this guy has been. Lower left-hand table, we face a cutoff 2.5x raise first in. We're in the big blind with 9-8 suited. We're just going to go ahead and defend that for a call. Check to him on the 10-9-3 two-tone. Upper left-hand table, the player that raised the button, he flat calls our pre-flop 3-bet. We're going to go ahead and bet into him small. Actually, given how tight this guy is and how coordinated that board is, I'm going to go ahead and deviate and check range and then sort of under-rep my top pair, top kicker. Lower left-hand table, middle pair, backdoor flush draw, facing a 1/3 bet. We're just going to go ahead and check call that. Now he bets 26. He mashes his pot button out there. I don't think I really can do much else but check raise all in. I know he's going to be showing me aces or kings a decent portion of the time here, but I've just got to go ahead and get this in when I've got top pair, top kicker, and a 3-bet pot. But that pre-flop range being so tight makes this situation so funky. He snap calls and picks me off with kings, so my read was good enough to be correct, but not good enough to go with, and I end up stacking off. Lower right-hand table, we're going to open the button with 8-6 suited. Let's see here. We've actually got open-ender. We've got an open-ender and third pair, so I'm just going to go ahead and check call that second bet against that player, and then check the river on the queen. Lower right-hand table, our button raise first in faces a 4.5x 3-bet from the big blind. 8-6 suited would probably be good enough to call at equilibrium, but against a pool that's slightly tighter, I think this hand ends up becoming a fold, so I'm going to go ahead and fold it out instead. And I outdrew his ace-jack that turned top pair, top kicker on the turn with that 8-9 hand. Lower left-hand table, we're going to raise first in from the button with king-queen offsuit. Lower right-hand table against the cutoff, raise first in, the small blind 3-bet. I'll just go ahead and either cold 4-bet or fold, which means a fold for 5-6 suited. Lower left-hand table will range bet small on the 9-5-4 two-tone flop. We get quickly called. Peel a 10 of clubs, which gives us a gut shot and 2 overcards. I want to bet some of my king-queen here, but I'm going to prioritize the ones that have a queen in my hand that block the flush or can get some value when they make a flush on the river on the 4-flush board. Here with king-queen, no club, I'm going to check this back and play the river. So I've got some king-queen in my betting range and some king-queen in my checking range. Now, however, when he goes ahead and checks to me again, I'm going to turn my king-high into a bluff. I'm not going to use a larger sizing. There's really not too many larger value hands in my range that goes bet, check, bet. So I'll just kind of use a smaller, more standard 2/3-ish type size on the river to bluff, and I managed to take that one down. Upper left-hand table, a 25 blind player limps blind on blind. We'll go ahead and raise him up from the big blind with something like a 40 to 45%, kind of a standard GTO-ish type button raise first in range, and we will, of course, include our king-jack suited as part of that. He checks to me, so we will range bet small on the queen 7-7 two-tone. No backdoor flush draws. We do have some backdoor straight draws and good removal to the queen X, the best queen X type hands that should be in his range, like king queen and queen jack. So some merit to barreling with that hand, all 3 streets. I'd be blasting that hand on in addition to the flop on either the turn and the river or the river itself, depending on which cards show up. But I'd be putting at least another bet as a bluff somewhere with that hand on improved in almost all cases. Recreational player open limps the button. We go ahead and complete our small blind with 8-7 suited, and we're going to go ahead and check our range on the 10-9-7 rainbow flop. Looking to mostly check call here with bottom pair and the open-ended straight draw. River is the 8, which gives us a bottom 2 pair on a 4 straight. I'd stab this a lot. However, a hand like bottom 2 pair is kind of right in the middle of too good to fold out very many better hands and too weak to get value from worse type hands. And now the recreational player jams all in 22 blinds into a 2.85 blind pot on the turn, so we can just go ahead and comfortably fold our non-Jack X hands. Lower left-hand table, blind on blind, we will raise first in with the 7-6 suited, which of course is very standard. Big blind calls, and we'll check range on the ace-9 deuce two-tone. Get a backdoor flush draw, some backdoor straights, particularly on the 8. I can have aces, 9s, deuces, ace-9, ace-deuce, maybe even the 9-deuce suited combos. I'm going to go ahead and put in a check raise with this particular hand. It's very hard for him to give me credit for too many bluffs on a board like this. I can really only be bluffing with these backdoor straight and flush draw type hands. I think this one's going to be okay to use. Having turned the 8, we now have an open-ended straight draw. Having picked up equity, we have little choice but to go ahead and continue barreling. I'd be mostly giving up, but that's one of the best possible turn cards for me. So I will go ahead and put in that next bet. Lower right-hand table, we face a 2x raise first in from the cutoff, so I'm just going to go ahead and defend that with the 6-2 suited and check range on the ace-jack-6. I have no showdown value here with more or less the nut-low type hand. However, I don't know that I get too many folds from ace-X's. I can be against some traps against ace-9, ace-8, ace-deuce, ace-4, nines or deuces. Given that the triple barrel here and that check raise and barrel off is really marginal, I'm just going to go ahead and not blast off this one and just surrender my 7 high, even though I very rarely do that. But that check raise and barrel off line is not nearly as prone to being overfolded by the pool, especially in a blind on blind spot. So I think it's going to be okay to actually give up a bit here, even though my hand has no showdown value whatsoever. Now he goes all in. He's repping essentially a very strong hand, a 2-pair plus or set type hand, or some kind of weird flop float, maybe a hand like Jack-10 that turned and opened in a straight draw and continued. I'm, of course, going to fold out with my 7 high, regardless of what it is I think he has. Lower right-hand table, I'll go ahead and call it a half-size flop bet here with my 6-deuce bottom pair. Now that I turned second pair, I turned 2-pair, but on a flush closing turn, I continued checking. He quickly checks back. I now want to try to get some value from any ace-X or some kind of weird jack-X or queen-X type hand that's in his range as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a small bet here with my 6-2, and got quickly called by what I assume is an ace-X type hand, a hand like ace-10, ace-8, something like that. Ace-7. So I think his play is fine, but I think my play is also fine. $2.5x open for middle position in the upper left-hand table, along with a flat call from both the button and small blind. Queen 4 is really slightly too loose to defend from a middle position raise first in anyway, and I would get a bit tighter with the other players in the pot for the most part as well. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that one. It's pretty close to start with, but with the other players in the pot, I think it becomes a clear fold. Upper right-hand table, cutoff raises first in for a 2.25x size, and I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet like a 13 to 14% range here, including my suited wheel aces like ace-4 suited. Probably have 6s plus, ace-jack plus, king-queen, any suited Broadway, any suited wheel ace, and any suited 9x type hand. It gets me to about 13.5%. I think that's a good pre-flop 3-bet range for that spot right there. Lower right-hand table, we raise king-10 offsuit from the cutoff. Tag this guy as a recreational player, playing 57-14 with a 25% limp over 8 hands. Also started a hand less than 100 blinds deep. That's probably enough information to go ahead and tag that guy as a recreational player. Excuse me. Lower right-hand table got a 2.5x or 2x open rather from the cutoff. We're in the big blind. We can defend very loosely against the 2x open, but maybe not as loose as a hand like Queen 5 offsuit that's just so nasty equity-wise. So we'll go ahead and fold that one, knowing that we will go ahead and call pretty much all of our suited cans, all of our connected hands, all of our ace high. A lot of our hands with even cards as high, even any 2 cards as high as 8s or 9s type things are better. Upper right-hand table, we raise first in, blind down blind with ace-6 offsuit. We get doubled up from 3 to 6, so we're going to go ahead and continue with essentially our entire range, although we will be cautious with 1 pair hands post-flop. Upper left-hand table, we checked in blind down blind against a small blind limper with Queen 5 offsuit. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise first in on the button with pocket 4s. We checked back with the Queen 5 on Ace King King two-tone. On the 4-turn double flush draw, I'm going to continue checking as my Queen high has an awful lot of showdown value here. We pretty much beat almost all non-pair hands. So I'm content to just take my showdown with this. I'm not going to get value from too much worse. I'm not going to really fold out too much better. That's a good hand to go ahead and just show down. We got a raise first in from the cutoff for 2.25x. We're on the button with King-Jack offsuit, which is slightly outside of my standard 3-bet range. I don't know enough to say that this guy is deviating and getting too wide from the cutoff to make me start throwing in some extra 3-bet hands from that spot, but it is pretty close. And then upper left-hand table, we raise blind down blind with Queen 9 suited and check range on the Queen King 9 two-tone board. He checks back. We peel in a 2 of clubs that completes the flush. I'm not going to be using overbet sizes very much here on this 3 flush turn board. I'm just going to go ahead and bet for value, bet smaller, let any kind of King X, naked club X type hands, various hands like pairs plus gut shots call me that are worse. Now that we get that 4th club, I'm just going to go ahead and try to show down my smallish 2 pair, my 3rd and 4th pair at this point. We run into pocket 7s with the club, which is not an unreasonable hand to call the 1-turn bet with, especially that he had the club in his hand. Just unfortunate that we got outdrawn. Lower left-hand table, we'll raise blind down blind with our pocket aces for a 3x raise first in. Upper right-hand table, we'll raise the cutoff first in with the ace-king offsuit for a 2.5x standard size. See, lower left-hand table, we've got a player who's kind of fishy in the button. The small blind hasn't been terribly aggressive, reasonably aggressive, but only over 21 hands. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a loose open, mostly targeting this fishy big blind player that's pretty deep. Upper right-hand table, we get 3-bet. I'll fold that 6-7 against the 3-bet in lower left-hand table. Upper right-hand table, we get 3-bet after we raise first in from the cutoff for a pretty large sizing from the small blind. Against the small blind that does this here, we can go ahead and mostly just call with our ace-king offsuit. We could also 4-bet that to get it in, but I'd like calling to have that in our calling range an awful lot too in position. Lower right-hand table, we'll go ahead and range bet on the ace-king-jack two-tone board after the big blind defends or under the gun raise first in. And I think this is a fine hand to check back on the turn. We want to keep betting with Queen X or 10X hands that don't have pairs. And I'm trying to think, I don't really have too many small flush draws there at that point. So I guess I could probably be betting some of my smaller 9X type flush draw hands like 9-10, 9-queen of spades. Club-wise, it's harder for me to have. I guess I could have Jack-10 of clubs that could be a bet. 10s I will check back. And facing that C-bet on the 9-high board, half pot, I will go ahead and call once with ace-king, looking to peel an overcard. And let me see here. On the river, I don't really have too many worse hands than pocket tens here. I guess I've got some 9-10 type hands, but I got some smaller pairs that could be bluffs. So maybe I'll go ahead and check my tens down. Tens could be pretty close to a river bluff here in this line. I'm just going to check it back. Second barrel with the ace king, I will fold out there on that queen high board, the queen turn. 2.5x open from the cutoff on the upper left-hand table. We've got a couple of recreational players come along, so I will come along as well. 2.5x open from middle position on the lower left-hand table. I will go ahead and call with my king 10. And we get that small bet. I guess I could have ace-queen, or I could have, I really would even 3-bet the ace-5 suited pre-flop. But he doesn't necessarily know that. And that small bet just faces so many folds. I've got a heart blocker. I've got a gut shot. I'm going to go ahead and put in the check raise with this hand, but check calling would also be fine. Having not picked up my straight or any kind of heart for additional equity, I think it's okay to just go ahead and slow down, though, after the check raise gets called once. Lower right-hand table, I open pocket twos from the button. I'm going to fold to that turn stab there after I start checking. I will range bet the twos on the Jack 8-4 two-tone board in the lower right-hand table. 6 comes, in offsuit 6. I can still have Jacks, 8s, 6s, and 4s. I can have Jack 8, at least the suited combos, perhaps the offsuit combos as well. I can have Jack 6 and Jacks 4 suited. I can have 8-6 suited, and a lot of 6-4 suited. I can have some 5-7 suited, maybe even some 5-7 offsuit. I think I want to be overbetting or checking here. I guess my overbet bluff hands are going to be hands like 7-9, 9-10, and its various gut shots, especially the club gut shots like Queen 9. Lower left-hand table, I'll open blind on blind with 7-6 offsuit. It's on the cusp of a standard open. Against the 3-bet, I will just go ahead and fold it. And against that small river bet, I'd be bluff catching a lot, but not with a hand that doesn't even beat 4x right there. I think I'll just go ahead and fold the deuces. I'm not expecting that to be bluff, bluff draws, or whiffed high card type hands that bricked out. I'm expecting that to be blocking type things with marginal showdown value like pocket 5s, ace 4, that kind of stuff. There's some merit in bluff raising this particular this spot, but I'm not going to do it with this particular hand. I'd want a little bit better removal to do it, something that has better removal to the 6s as well as the clubs. I'm going to go ahead and raise a bit loose on the button with the Queen 8 offsuit in the upper right-hand table. I'm going to raise a standard open the upper left-hand table from the button with Jack 5 suited. Upper right-hand table, I will range bet small on the Jack 3-4 against that fishy small blind player that came along, and I will fold to the check raise even though it's small, as I just have very little going on for this hand on that board. I will raise 9-7 suited from the cutoff on the lower left-hand table, and I will fold Jack 5 suited against the 3-bet on the upper left-hand table. Jack 9-8 rainbow board. We've got that recreational player who defended the big blind, so I will go ahead and bet him small. We get called. We peel a jack on the turn. My hand is largely way ahead or way behind. I'm content to go ahead and check back this 7x. I'm mostly going to be betting my 8s and 9s full, my various Jack X boats and good trips. My bluffs can be various 10x combos. I'm also going to be value betting my straights like Queen 10 or 10-7 suited. I can bluff some small flush draws and some King Jack type hands as well. Or I'm sorry, some King-Queen type hands as well. But I think 7-9, a lot of 9x type hands in particular are good hands to check back here. The 10x that I would check back would be hands like 10-9, 10-8, decent showdown value as well to go with my pair. He bets half pot, which is pretty bluffy from fish in general, but not necessarily on the 4 straight runouts. 4 straight river is pretty underbluffed, even though the half pot bet is pretty overbluffed. I think that all may come out to being a call, even though that I think I'm going to be showing Jack X or 10X an awful lot here. I think I can still go ahead and call this, but it's pretty close. He had Ace King, which was silly, but these guys do silly things. A weird spot here with the player that's been very aggressive 3-betting pre-flop. He pops me up to 6. I've got Ace Queen. I really can't 4-bet this small. I really have to either go all in or call or fold. Trying to decide if I can move this hand all in. Given how aggressive this guy has been, I think I'm actually going to go ahead and do that, especially with this overcaller. It shouldn't be that strong. There's 16 blinds out there. I'm going to go ahead and ship this in. A little bit close, but I should not be 4-betting small in that spot, as the sizes just don't allow me to 4-bet and then fold to a jam. Lower left-hand table, we raise King-Jack first in. We get called in the small blind by that recreational player. We get snapped off by that guy with Ace King on the upper right-hand table, which is a shame, but didn't sting us too bad, 30 blinds deep. Lower left-hand table, when that 10 comes off on the turn, we have all combos of King-Jack for the straight, including our actual holding. We've got aces, queens, 10s, Ace-Queen, Ace-10, Ace-4, Queen-10. I think this should be overbet or check situation. I'll use the 1.5x size. I'll probably be jamming the river. Yeah, 1.5x size sets me up for a little under a 2x type jam at this point here, which is what I want to use here. I've got the nuts straight. I think he's recreational and fishy, given that he's had some limps and weird play pre-flops. I'm just going to go ahead and jam my straight and hope I get called off by a hand like Ace-Jack, Queen-10. Upper right-hand table, button raises first in. We're going to go ahead and 3-bet the small blind with an aggressive, roughly 15% range, including our Ace-Jack suited, including really any suited ace, honestly. We get called. Queen-9-4 two-tone board. I'm just going to go ahead and range bet small. Can keep barreling some cards. The 10 is a great card to keep barreling. The ace obviously makes us top pair. Jack is probably a checking type card as it makes us second pair. We take it down, and the turn plan is trivial when we fold them out on the flop, as we did there. I don't expect a ton of folds on a board that's reasonably wet and coordinated like that on Queen-9 two-tone, but you still get some. A little too loose to open blind on blind with 10-5 offsuit in the lower right-hand table. The player hasn't been too aggressive with 3-bets pre-flop at 5% over 20 opportunities, but he has b29 loose with a 31-29 VPIP. If I thought he was going to fold way too much, I might just rob him with any 2, but given that he hasn't been particularly tight, I don't see any reason to expand my range that widely. Upper left-hand table, face a 2.5x cutoff open. A fishy small blind goes ahead and calls. I'm going to squeeze about the same as I would just 3-bet without the small blind caller in there. Roughly a 10% range, and I will use a suited wheel ace or 2, such as ace-5 suited in that range. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this one up here. You could also call up, but I think it's good to have an aggressive 3-betting range in these blind spots and these squeeze spots. So I definitely am going to use ace-5 as a 3-bet myself, but you could call it as well, and that wouldn't be bad. Okay, we get a 2.5x raise first in from middle position, cutoff and button both call. I'm going to go ahead and pop up, play a raise or fold strategy right here. Ace-Queen is going to be a part of that. think I'm just going to raise to call off against jams with hands like queens or better and ace king, and also have some bluffs mixed in there like ace queen, suited versions of ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, king queen, king jack, king 10, maybe queen jack, stuff like that. Recreational player comes along and calls. I'm going to go ahead and range bet small on the king 8 deuce two-tone board. Lower left-hand table, I will be range betting also on ace 6 deuce two-tone. Turn is the king of clubs. It's going to be, I have good blocking to the kings. I block ace king and ace queen. I've also got a clubbed card to bail me out. I think this is a pretty reasonable hand to get aggressive and go ahead and jam him all in. I could also have a lot of good king X type hands here to go ahead and do this. But given my good block, good removal to the king and my club to bail me back out, I think it's okay to jam that. He snaps me off right away with 9-6 suited, which has no business being in the pot, but has in fact turned a flush. So I don't love his earlier straight play, but the turn call is obviously fine. And the recreational tag on him is clearly appropriate as well. Recreational player overbets the pot 2x in the check call check bet line. I'm just going to go ahead and fold my bluff catcher, as the fish do not bluff nearly aggressively enough in that spot. Not for that sizing. $2.5x open from middle position on the lower right-hand table. We can go ahead and defend with small suited connected cards like 4-3 suited. Upper right-hand table, nobody's showing any initiative on that monotone queen 7 deuce flop. I'll start stabbing at the turn. Upper left-hand table, we'll go ahead and range bet on the 6-4 deuce two-tone. When we get that 4 flush runner on the upper right-hand table, I'm going to turn my 3s no spade into a bluff, use a pot-size bet on that 4 flush run out. I will check back the ace-8 of spades now when I got called on the upper left-hand table. Upper right-hand table, I'll open aces under the gun. It's a pretty good bluff-catching card for me there on the river, especially for that half-pot lead. So I'm just going to go ahead and call that down. And I was against a weak pair that bet me for half-pot. Upper right-hand table against the aces, we face that very small 3-bet, from 2.5 to 5 against that fishy player that's been doing an awful lot of that. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my 4-bet against this guy. It'll be stacking off against this guy with jacks plus and ace-king, maybe even 10s plus ace-king, because he's just been so aggressive with that small bet. So I'm going to go ahead and raise this up. I don't want to get tricky and flat and let a couple guys come in that pot for cheap like this. I just want to get extra money in now. I probably wouldn't even have too many pre-flop bluffs against this guy because of the sizing that we're using. I might throw in a couple, but I'm trying to mostly get this guy out of the way or put a bunch of money in pre-flop, and I got this guy to shove his ace-queen all in against me. And our aces hold up, so we pick up a nice pot there against a guy that's just been too active and too aggressive so far. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, we get a 3x open. We're sitting there with ace-deuce suited, which we will go ahead and defend for a call. We face a small 1/3 bet, so we will, of course, continue with the ace-deuce. No reason to raise here. Just go ahead and call for a flat call. Now, when he checks the turn, I'm going to go ahead and put in a smaller bet, with my trip aces, trying to get called by a heart draw or some kind of jack X, especially with the gut shot, jack X or 10X. I think it's okay to bet this and probably bet it again on the river against the check call. But I see no reason to check back that turn or to have raised the flop. very nitty big blind, and the small blind hasn't been particularly wild or aggressive, so I'm going to make a loose open from the button with the 9-3 suited. And we get 3-bet, and we will fold. Blind on blind, the lower left-hand table against a recreational player. We'll open our king-queen suited. We're going to check range on the ace-jack-4 two-tone board. We've got the gut shot to Broadway as well as the flush draw. So pretty good flop for our hand. Lower right-hand table will defend the 3x open with pocket threes, although it's a bit questionable against a player that's short. And we're just going to check call with our second nut flush draw and Broadway draw. Check range on the jack-6-3 two-tone board on the lower right-hand table. And we'll check raise this particular player. We'll check call again with the king-high flush draw in that blind battle and check one more time now that we hit that 7 of spades. We get called by the player in the lower right-hand table, and we've got a little bit less than a pot, about a 75% stack pot ratio left. We're just going to go ahead and jam all in with our bottom set. And calls us down with ace-queen high. No pair, no draw. Drawing dead. Happy about that. Lower left-hand table, we open king-8 from the button. Upper left-hand table, we raise the limper in the blind-on-blind spot with our king-jack offsuit. We go ahead and range bet small on king-7 deuce two-tone. He check calls and checks to us again. We check back with no real equity or draws, but some cards that can make good bluff-catching second pairs, such as the jack or the 10. However, against that small river bet, when we're still sitting on jack high, we will just fold out. And that player had ace-4 in that hand where we made the flush. So unfortunately, he checked back something decently strong when that third spade peeled in the river. I mean, our hand was the draw was pretty obvious. The fact that we could have it is not out of the question. I was hoping to get another bet there, especially against a weaker player when that spade peeled off to make our flush on the river. But I do think our turn call with the second nut flush draw and the gut shot to Broadway's nut straight is pretty reasonable. I think it was a half pot bet, so it's a very trivial call. I guess you could maybe talk me into maybe donking the river against a fish. I don't do a whole lot of that, but perhaps there's some merit towards doing that, when an obvious draw completes that we have. And he might check back, but might not be able to fold his ace or aces up. And we can just check fold the threes to the in position player on the ace-9 queen two-tone board. Lower right-hand table will raise pocket threes from the cutoff. Upper right-hand table, player opens from the cutoff, but he's been extremely passive pre-flop, 35-0 over 18 hands, no raises and 17 opportunities. So I'm going to treat him like a tighter player than I would typically from the cutoff. That said, a 2x raise first in justifies an awful lot of calls, but some of the weak offsuit aces aren't in there against tighter ranges, so this actually is a fold in my opinion. Not because of the formation or the size, but because this player has been so tight that despite the fact he's opening for 2x from the cutoff, I don't put that to be an upper 20% range like it would be against a more standard player. So I'm going to go ahead and make a slightly tight fold there just because I think this player's range is a bit too strong. Upper left-hand table, we open King-Jack suited from the button. We get a small blind player who calls us, who seems to be on the fishy side, 57-0 with some limps over 14 hands. We'll go ahead and range bet him small on the Ace-7-4 rainbow board. Lower left-hand table, we have a recreational player in the big blind and a small blind that's playing about 50 blinds deep, probably also weak. So we'll go ahead and open a bit loose with the 7-6 offsuit on the button. The recreational player calls us. We get a King-9-5 two-tone board, so we will go ahead and range bet that small. Very happy to pick up an 8 against this guy. Didn't pick up the 8, but we did pick up a double gut shot now with that 3. Both the 4 and the 8 make the straight for us. We also have some equity with this 7 of clubs on that third club there. So I'm going to go ahead and continue barreling this particular hand. Probably check back a 4th club river, but probably barreling off on pretty much any other card that doesn't improve my hand. And of course, value betting on either the 8 or the 4. We'll go ahead and raise the cutoff on the lower left-hand table with the Queen-10 offsuit. Upper left-hand table, this table is Jack-8 suited in middle position, kind of on the cusp of being a raise first in. The table doesn't seem to be particularly loose or particularly passive, particularly fishy, rather. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that one. I was going to think about replacing this table, but now that I see that player in position to me limps, I think it's going to be pretty safe to consider him to be a recreational. So I'm going to go ahead and stick around. Yeah, and actually, for some reason, his stat disappeared, but I had that guy tagged as a fish from earlier, from playing 63-0 over 16 hands with 50% limps thus far. Limped 4 chances out of 8. I think it's pretty safe to say that he's a weak player, so we'll actually stick around a bit longer, even though he's in position to us. Just because having weak players at the table is always good, what I'm looking for. This player we can tag as well, playing 45 over 21 hands with limps in there as well. Upper left-hand table, we face a 2.5x cutoff open. We're in the big blind. We can defend with small suited connected cards like 5 deuce suited. And I will check range to him on the King-10 deuce two-tone board. And against that small flop bet, I'm going to go ahead and put in the raise with bottom pair. I want to be continuing against that small bet, either with a bet, either for a bet or a raise. I can have some combos of King-10. I can have some deuces. I could probably even have some 10 deuce suited. Well, maybe not pre-flop, not for that size. But I think it's okay to go ahead and just sort of try to raise him off weird random overcards that don't have much any equity. 5 gets there, which is an interesting river card after the turn checks through because it completes my it completes the flush, but also gives me a small 2 pair. I think I want to be trying to value bet against some kind of marginal-ish 1 pair type hands that took that same line. I can certainly fold if he raises me all in, representing the flush. Just don't expect to get bluff raised in this line very often, or bluff raised in the river very much in general anyway. But I do want to try to get value from hands like King-Queen that are still in his range, that just don't believe that check raise, check bet line from me. Lower left-hand table, we're going to raise the button, or re-raise the button rather, against the cutoff raise first in. Probably being a bit tighter than typical, as this guy's been very tight, 14-12 over 51 hands with some more passive pre-flop stats. I'm going to treat that more like a middle position open and prop him up with about 10% of hands as opposed to about 13 or 14. But that said, suited broadways like ace-jack suited is still going to be in there. And unfortunately, we get jammed over the top by a player playing 50 blinds deep. We really can't call off against a guy like that here with ace-jack suited. I think it just needs to be a fold. I don't think it's that close, getting 3-2, getting about a 40% price on our call there. I think we're just going to be dominated too large a percentage of the time. Lower right-hand table, we open king-jack from the cutoff. Upper left-hand table, we'll raise first in middle position with a standard raise first in range of about 22%, of course including pocket queens. Lower right-hand table, we'll raise the button first in with ace-5 offsuit. Recreational player calls me in position on the cutoff with the queen's hand, and we get squeezed by a player who seems to be pretty aggressive thus far. He's playing 41-36. It's his second 3-bet now in 9 hands. I think I'm going to go ahead and actually treat this more like a GTO type opponent, and I would often just call jacks, but given that I don't want to call nearly as much, if I had pocket jacks, of course, queens are going to be a 4-bet and call off no matter what anyway. But I think I would actually also 4-bet jacks to get the money in here as well, given that I think this guy is sufficiently aggressive to justify it. And I might have a few extra 4-bet bluffs in my hand, maybe throw a wheel ace in there like ace-5 suited. Lower right-hand table, blind on blind, we face a 3x raise first in. We can go ahead and defend with a hand like 10-5 suited. We get check 2 on the jack 9-7 monotone board. I am going to go ahead and stab for half pot here with my gut shot. I want to be stabbing for half pot with my pairs that want protection, my strong hands like my flop flushes, 2 pairs, sets. I guess I have pocket 7s as a set. My good naked club draws and some gut shot draws as well. Let me see here. He goes ahead and checks to me. I think I'm going to go ahead and put this into the check range on the turn, having not picked up any more equity in any way, shape, or form, and not having any kind of club to help bail me out. I can, however, turn this into a bluff on that 4-club river if he checks to me, and I'll be using a pot-sized bet on the 4-flush run out. Yeah, he checks to me, so I'm going to go ahead and put my bluff in. I can have some good clubs in my range here, too, that check back, particularly the ones that have some sort of pair on the turn that didn't want to keep betting. Upper right-hand table, we had a under-the-gun limper or middle position limper, small blind completes. We check our big blind in with jack-6 offsuit. We check range on queen 10-3 two-tone, and then it checks to us again on the turn. Now we've made third pair with the 6. We're going to go ahead and start betting this out, just as nobody's really shown any initiative in this pot so far. I think I can actually fold out a decent bit of 10x and even some queen x on that particular card. I've got good removal to the straights with the jack in my hand, both jack 9 and jack queen. I don't block the flush draws. I'm going to use this hand as an overbet bluff here, and I get a quick fold. A smaller bluff there might not get folds from 10x, much less queen x, so I don't really like bluffing for a smaller size in that pot. But given my great removal to the straights or two pair of set type hands with my 6x, which is really no longer good enough to show down at that point with three higher cards out there that also coordinate heavily with the straight. I block the straight. I don't block the brick flush draws. There would be auto folds. I think that's a very fine hand to put into that river bluff and to use the overbet size for it as well. Upper right-hand table, we get looks like a poster and then a limper behind. I'm going to go ahead and isolate a fairly tight range in that spot, probably something like a middle position raise first in, low 20%, but that will include King 10 offsuit. Lower right-hand table, we open the King 10, or Ace King offsuit rather, in the cutoff, which is of course standard. And on that table now in middle position, we'll open Ace Queen offsuit, again standard. Lower left-hand table will open Ace King or Ace 6 suited from the cutoff. Upper left-hand table against the under the gun raise first in and the fishy player calling, we will squeeze with our King Queen offsuit. Over here against that 3-bet and then the call off, I'm just going to fold the Ace King. Against the re-raise in position, I'm going to go ahead and use Ace Queen as my 4-bet bluff on the lower right-hand table. Lower left-hand table, get a small bet and then a call. With us having trip aces, no reason to raise, no reason to fold. The 3-betting player in the lower right-hand table calls us. We're going to go ahead and range bet small on that Queen 10 deuce two-tone board. We've got top pair, top kicker, which is obviously a pretty good spot to be. He flat calls us. I'm going to go ahead and trap now with the queen. It's harder for him to have worse queens that came along there with me blocking. I'm going to trap with the queens and the aces. I'm going to jam the kings in. Ace queen with the diamond's going to make better sense as a trap as I block the flush draws. And now on the river, having peeled that ace, I'm just going to go ahead and jam all in. Got top two. And I just don't really think that this, oh, and I ran into a set of queens, which is a shame, but that's the way this session is going right now, so that's very reasonable. On the turn here, I faced that flop min raise, and then he bets 5 into 55. I'm, of course, going to call with my open-ended straight draw 2 overcards. I'm not going to give this guy credit for a bluff here on this trip aces board, and I've got a very weak trips hand. I'm going to go ahead and fold out to this overbet. Here I've got king high, nothing else I can do. I didn't hit any of my good cards where I could have possibly got a bunch of money in against this recreational player, and I'm not going to try to bluff this guy either, not when he actually block bets the river. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold that one out. I guess it's a decent candidate for a bluff raise as I block queen 9. That's that I just don't want to get too much into bluff raising fish in big pots, especially when they've already put a bet in on the river. I just don't know that those guys fold enough decent hands at that point to justify it. Upper left-hand table, normally queen 6 suited is going to be a defense against the 2.5x raise first in from the button, but this player has been so tight and passive thus far. It's only the second hand he's raised in 19 chances. I'm going to go ahead and give him credit for being a bit tighter, which makes this hand more like a fold. But that's a deviation based on how tight this player has been so far. Tag this guy as a recreational, playing 64-23 with 33% limps over 15 hands. This guy is also going to be a rec. Raise 8-6 suited from the button on that table, which is a standard raise first in. However, we get donked into for half pot with nothing but 8 high, weak backdoor draws. I'm going to get backdoor flush draws, not a weak backdoor draw, but only with only backdoor draws and 8 high, there's no reason to go ahead and continue against that particular player. Tight under the gun, or tight middle position player raises first in. I am going to 3-bet him, even though he's tighter. I will just be a bit tighter myself, but ace queen suited is still going to be a part of that. Probably using more like an under the gun, or like a versus under the gun 3-bet range here, 7 to 7.5%. 9s plus, ace queen plus, suited versions of ace 10, king 10, queen jack suited plus, and maybe ace 5 suited to have a wheel ace in there as well. Get cold called by what appears to be a fishy player in the small blind and the under the gun raiser. Lower right hand table, we're going to raise first in from under the gun with ace king suited. Lower left hand table, we'll range bet on ace 10 9 rainbow. I'm going to check back and not range bet because I'm multi-way in this 3-bet pot over here. Turn on that hand with the queens is a king. I'm content to check that back. I want some queen X and jack X in my check back range, and the ones with pairs are the better versions to have that be, so I will go ahead and check back the queens. Upper right hand table, we raise the cutoff or the butt off first in with 10-8 suited. And against this small river bet, I have to just go ahead and call, even though it's going to be ace-X some portion of the time. Against this real small turn lead, I'm trying to decide if there's any merit to raising. I think I'm going to treat that just like a fancy check and go ahead and put a raise in here. So I've got 2 overs and a gut shot, good removal to the pair call down type hands. I'm not expecting these players to be particularly strong when they take those weird lines on the flop and the turn. Not so much the flop being weird, but the turn being weird. Upper right-hand table, our button raise first in faces a 3-bet from the big blind for a very large size. We can still go ahead and defend with 8-7 suited. We can defend most of our suited connectors in a spot like that. We've got a little less than pot size bet left. Nothing to do at this stage, but go ahead and barrel him off. We block a lot of the hands that he can call down with, like ace-jack, queen-jack. Got good removal to the straights. So he's sitting there on 9-10, so he called me down with second pair and the brick flush draw. I don't think that's a great play whatsoever, but it's a play he chose to make, and nothing's going right for us right now, so why would a bluff not get through? Of course, that also makes a lot of sense. Our play is okay there, I do think, just because it forces him to call down with some weak hands like that. You could also flat that small little turn bet and play the river if you wanted as well with your gut shot and 2 overcards. As long as you don't fold the turn, that's fine. I think raising up to put those guys in a bad spot when nobody showed too much initiative in that pot is going to be just fine as well, though. Upper right-hand table, the cutoff, we raise first in from the cutoff, get 3-bet by the in-position player to about a 3.5x size. I'm going to go ahead and defend with the queen-jack. That's a fairly standard defense here. Lower right-hand table, we're going to go ahead and range bet on the king-queen 3 two-tone board. I will check range out of position on the 5-3-3 board. In the lower right-hand table, I'm going to check back, having made that third pair hand. I'm going to go ahead and check raise this, as I can just get very aggressive. I pick up either a top pair or I pick up some kind of flush draw on the turn. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as a check raise. On the river there, when I check back to 7s, I've got a lot of 7x in my range I can legitimately value bet with, so I'm going to be using a 2x size here as opposed to a more standard size and try to get hero called by a king or a queen. I've made my trips. Lower left-hand table, the flop checks through. I'm going to go ahead and start stabbing with my trip jacks. And now he goes ahead and calls the turn. We pick up that heart draw on the turn with the 10 of hearts. I do want to keep betting this. I don't want to jam all in for 1.5x pot here, so I think I'm going to go ahead and continue betting him small. On the river on the lower right-hand table, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to value bet large, try to get hero called by the ace. I'm going to put in that 2x size. And he check called me down twice. I'm not actually going to triple barrel off in this check raise lines. I just don't think he's got enough weak hands that will justify making a fold out. If I had rivered the king, I would value bet this all in. But here I could just be trapped too much or against middle pairs that are getting too sticky, so I'm going to surrender this one. And he moves all in. He could easily have a hand like tens or queens as well. I, of course, just go ahead and fold my king high that bricked out. Lower or upper left-hand table, blind on blind. We'll defend the 3x open with the pocket fives against a guy who's been active so far. He bets into us for half pot. We, of course, continue with our set. You could also raise there. I don't really raise very much in these blind on blind spots, but you could do it. He bets into me on the turn. He only bets half pot. I want to go ahead and start getting some more money in that pot now, so I'm going to go ahead and let me see here. I think I'll put in about a pot size bet that gives me enough room to go ahead and jam the river as well. Lower left hand or lower right hand table, we get a raise first in from the button who's been pretty tight, so I'm actually going to go ahead and be slightly tight myself and not 3-bet him there, even though it would be fairly standard to do so. Just because he's been tighter, 14-7 over the first couple of orbits. Lower left hand table, we raise first in on the button, then the big blind just doubles us back, so we're of course going to call with essentially everything that's not 4-bet, including our 10-9 offsuit. On the Jack 8-6 rainbow board, he checks to me, so I'm actually going to go ahead and stab half pot with my open-ended straight draw. And he goes ahead and check raises me, but I'm going to continue with that open-ended straight draw. Hopefully get a free river if he checks. But for that sizing, which is a little behind, I'm actually going to fold this on the turn. And perhaps I can check back the flop to not get myself check raised on the flop so much, but I just don't know that it happens that much. But that would have allowed me to get to the river with a hand with a lot of equity when I otherwise didn't. Upper left-hand table, under the gun player limps, we're going to go ahead and isolate from the button with pocket sixes. Lower left-hand table, we're going to raise first in from the cutoff with Jack 10. We're also going to shut this session down when these orbits come back around to my big blind and call it quits. We're not going to check Jack high with only some weak back doors on the lower left-hand table, and we're not going to range bet, of course, because there's multiple players in that pot. Upper left-hand table, the limp calls, and we get a Jack 10 deuce rainbow board. I'm going to go ahead and range bet him small. And we get a small turn lead here. I think it's all going to be okay to continue with this gut shot against a fishy player that bets small. We also have the club. We might not call with all of them, but the ones with the clubs I think I would call. He bets half pot. I'm not going to try to put any kind of bluff raise. If he checked, I would obviously go ahead and bluff with that hand. But against the river bet, I'm just going to go ahead and surrender it and fold it. I will check back with the sixes now against the check call on the flop over there. Lower right-hand table, our cutoff raise first in, faced a small blind 3-bet. We're sitting there with 4-5 suited. This is pretty close to call, but this guy hasn't 3-bet yet, so I'm going to be a bit on the tight side and go ahead and fold it. And I'm going to go ahead and just check down my sixes. I'm not going to try to value bet an ace high or a hand like ace deuce, something like that, because I'm going to run into Jack X or 10X too much. And that's about it for the session. This one did not go so well. We lost about 5 buy-ins on cash and about 4 buy-ins on the all-in adjusted equity stat as well. But it happens from time to time. Even though I got my head cracked, I hope you enjoyed watching or I hope you learned something. This is Charlie Murphy signing off.